Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? You know those lists you see sometimes, like top 10 things you need to see before you? You know.
Right, right.
So it's kind of like that, but a divine to-do list. You brought us the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, the Yoga of Divine Manifestations. And, well, it dives into this whole other level of, I guess you could say, like a cosmic bucket list, but from Krishna's point of view.
Yeah, it's really interesting how it kind of shifts gears from what we were looking at before. Like, you've been exploring this idea of Brahman, this ultimate reality, kind of formless, right? And then, boom, Krishna gets super specific.
Right, like here's the divine highlight reel.
Exactly. Like mountains, music, even letters of the alphabet. He's in it all.
Okay, hold on. Letters. As in ABC letters. Now, that's what I call tangible evidence. I got to admit, I didn't have alphabet soup on my Bhagavad Gita bingo card.
Laughs.
Right.
But that's what I love about this chapter. It uses these everyday things we can actually wrap our heads around to make these huge, profound ideas click.
So instead of saying contemplate the infinite, it's more like, hey, ever notice how cool the letter A is?
Exactly. It's brilliant, really. Krishna knew we'd need a little help connecting the dots sometimes. And we can't forget Arjuna in all of this. He's like us, always asking those burning questions.
Totally. Always pushing for those real-world applications. So I'm curious, when Krishna starts listing off the things he identifies with, there's some obvious ones, sun, moon, you get it. But then he throws in the letter A, just casually. Like, what's the deeper meaning there? Why A and not, say, Z?
Oh, that's one of my favorites. So you know how Sanskrit, the language of the Gita, it's all about the sounds, right?
Yeah, it's like super vibrational or something.
Yeah, totally. And the letter A, that's like the OG sound, the root. All the other sounds come from A. It's like the seed of all language, all creation even.
Okay, now that you put it that way, it's kind of blowing my mind. So Krishna is saying he's like the fundamental building block of expression of everything.
Exactly. It's not just about a letter, but what that letter represents. It's like a cosmic code.
Okay, I'm starting to see it. But it's not just letters, right? There's that part about Ukasravas, the winged horse from mythology.
Yeah.
So we're going from alphabet to, like, Greek mythology here.
Right. And, horses are often about power, freedom, right?
Right.
But this horse, Bukesravas, he's the ultimate horse, born of nectar, practically a god himself.
Okay, so it's like levels to this. Even among the most awesome things we can think of, there's still that spark of the divine.
Precisely. Every example, it's another thread in this massive tapestry of existence. And Krishna's saying, look, it's all connected back to me.
That's a pretty amazing way to think about it. But, it wouldn't be a good deep dive if we didn't, well, dive into the more challenging parts,
Yeah.
right?
So Krishna throws us a curveball, saying he's the gambling of the deceitful. Honestly, that feels a little ominous after all that sun, moon, and winged horse talk. Like, shouldn't the divine be all, well, divine?
It does make you think, doesn't it? But that's where this idea gets really powerful. He's showing us that the divine isn't limited to what we might consider good or pure. He's present in everything, the light and the dark, the messy and the confusing.
So it's not about picking and choosing which parts of reality get to be considered divine. Exactly. It's about understanding that this divine energy, it's everywhere, in everything. And honestly, that's kind of a game changer.
That's where things start to get really interesting, right? But how do we actually live that? Like, it's one thing to read it, but how do we start to experience that idea of the divine being woven into every single thing?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And that's where we're heading next.
So are we talking like meditation? Is that the secret sauce here?
Well, the Gita does talk about meditation, but not just in that, sitting on a mountaintop kind of way. It's more about paying attention, really seeing the world around us.
Okay, so less about emptying your mind, more about like filling it up with the right stuff.
Exactly. It's about shifting our focus from the everyday chaos to the subtle ways the divine is already present. Remember those examples we talked about? The warmth of your coffee, the sound of a laugh. It starts with appreciating those things.
So like mindfulness, but with a shot of divine espresso.
I love that. Yeah, it's like next time you're having that coffee, don't just gulp it down. Really taste it, smell it, feel the warmth of the mug in your hands. Those little moments, those can become like mini meditations.
Okay, I can get behind that.
Yeah.
But how do we make that leap from good coffee to connecting with something bigger?
It goes back to those qualities Krishna talks about. When you see those qualities reflected in the world around you, the warmth of the sun, the beauty of a sunset, the kindness of a stranger, take a second. Ask yourself, what does this tell me about the divine? And how can I embody that same quality in my own life?
I like it. So it's like a scavenger hunt. But instead of looking for objects, we're searching for reflections of the divine in everything.
Exactly. And the more you look, the more you start to see those connections everywhere. It's like building a muscle. The more you practice, the easier it gets.
So it's not enough to just see those qualities out there. We have to find them within ourselves, too.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we're not separate from that divine energy. It's not out there somewhere. It's also within us.
This whole conversation has been mind-blowing. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, you mentioned that Krishna supports the entire universe, everything, with just a fraction of himself.
Right. It's a pretty wild thought, isn't it?
It's almost too much to wrap my head around. It's like saying the entire universe is just the tip of the cosmic iceberg.
Exactly. It makes you realize just how limited our human perspective really is.
So how do we even begin to process that? Where do we even go from here?
Maybe that's the point, you know? We don't have to have it all figured out.
So it's more about being open to the mystery than finding all the answers.
Exactly. This chapter, it's not giving us a map. It's more like it's showing us that there is a map, but it's way bigger, more complex than we can imagine.
I kind of like that idea. It's like I might never climb Mount Everest, but knowing it's there, that changes things.
Right. And it's not about feeling small either. It's about tapping into that awe, that wonder, and letting it open us up.
So instead of shrinking back, we lean into it.
Exactly. It's like that feeling you get looking at a starry night, you know? It's humbling, but it's also incredibly beautiful. That's where the real connection happens, in that surrender.
I'm starting to get what you mean. It's like accepting that there are things we may never fully grasp. That's actually freeing in a weird way.
Exactly. It allows us to let go of our need to control, to understand everything. And in that letting go, we find a deeper peace, a deeper connection to something much greater than ourselves.
Wow. This whole conversation has really shifted my perspective. I think I might just have to swap that second cup of coffee for some actual meditation.
You know, you just might be surprised at what you discover.
I have a feeling you're right. Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to resurface from this deep dive into Chapter 10. A huge thank you to you for helping us unpack all this.
It's been my pleasure. This chapter, it's full of so much wisdom, it never gets old.
And to everyone listening, remember that question we were talking about how Krishna supports the whole world with just a fraction of himself? What does that tell us about the scale of things? And where do we fit in? Keep those thoughts brewing, keep exploring Chapter 10, and until next time, happy diving.